numbers, in the UK, you have 18 million organ donors. And the United States has 100 million active donors. Despite that, we have long waiting times. So, like was mentioned before, China has denied for many, many years that they were using executed prisoners. And in fact, a famous transplant surgeon came to the United States. This guy named Wang Guoji came in 2001, went in front of a U.S. Congress hearing and said to them, you know what? It's true. In China, we're using executed prisoners' organs and we're selling them to people. And the U.S. Congress then turned around and said to China, is this true? And their health minister says, denied the allegation, called them vicious and hurtful lies, and then said China strictly prohibits the sale of human organs and they only take it from voluntary donation. So they flat out lied and completely denied it. But it wasn't until 2005 that the Vice Minister of Health, Huang Jiefu, actually admitted, came in front of people and said, you know what, it's true. The majority of organs we're using are coming from executed prisoners. And they gave a pretty famous now presentation at a Transplant Society conference in Madrid in 2010. Came with a PowerPoint presentation and basically said, listen, 90% of the organs we're doing is from executed prisoners. And he confirmed this. And he gave these numbers. He said in China, at the time, he gave the numbers from 2008 to 2009. He said China at the time, we were doing over 10,000 organ transplants a year. That's a phenomenal amount of number. Again, second only to the US. And 90% of these are coming from executed prisoners. That's China's Vice Minister of Health saying this. And they're the only government in the world. This doesn't happen anywhere else in the world. The only government that condones using executed prisoners on a large scale as their source of organ transplantation. Every medical society, American Medical Association, World Health Organization, World Medical Association, International Transplant, all of them have strong stances against using executed prisoners. And I just wanted to put on the bottom here, the World Health Organization, like I said before, their guiding principles, China fails on all their guiding principles, especially on this, they have to have traceable, transparent, and open for scrutiny. They absolutely fail on all three. There's no independent evaluations. You can't go in there and look at their numbers. All their public registries that they're supposed to have are all closed. I wanted to show a quick, short video because what I'd like to do is let you hear from international transplant doctors from themselves what they think about China's transplant system. So I'm going to blank the screen for a second, and hopefully you have the video queued, and we're going to play a short video. And this is from a movie called Red Rain.
A patient of mine who has been hospitalized for more than a year in my department at being at the top list of candidates for heart transplantation, what we call status 1, and we couldn't find a heart for him, has come to me, approached me one day and told me, Professor Levy, I'm about to go to China in 2 weeks' time and they've scheduled me for a heart transplantation. And I looked at him and I thought that he was kidding, but he was dead serious. And that's actually what happened. The guy went to China, and exactly on the same date that he was told ahead of time, 2 weeks ahead of time, he got his heart transplant. This got me going into a quite extensive research to find out how come somebody can schedule a heart transplant ahead of time.
There's only a small window of time that a healthy organ can survive outside a body. This window of time is called ischemia. For a kidney, it's 12 to 24 hours, a liver, 12 hours, and a heart can only survive outside a body between 4 to 6 hours.
What I found was something that was obvious for many years, and I didn't know about it, that for more than 20 years, organ procurement in China from executed prisoners has been taking place under official, legal knowledge of all authorities in China. And actually, organs from these executed prisoners have been used for any patients flocking from all over the world who could afford to get a transplant from these prisoners.
It becomes a little difficult to differentiate between whether or not the execution is being performed for the execution or for the donation. So what's convenient, it's hard sometimes we cross a barrier here. Is this patient who's going to be executed anyway? Or is the execution a part of the fact, well, there's some good organs here? We know that some of the executions are timed for the organ transplants. So we know that has to be true, certainly for heart and sometimes the liver transplants too. You need to time it. You have a recipient and your donor. Well, when are you going to shoot them? When are you going to poison them? When are you going to do it? Well, that's nauseating. It's disgusting. It's criminal.
I read a paper in the medical literature saying that they developed a method in China where they cover a severely burned patient with almost 90% burned with human skin as a temporary coverage. We are using the same method all over the world with narrow strips of skin that are taken from cadavers. But this article from China said that they used a whole body skin, like a whole envelope. And I asked the surgeon, how do you freeze such a huge piece of skin? He said, no, we are not using any freezing method. I said, how come? He said, we are using only fresh. So, how you happen to have fresh skin in such huge dimension? He said, no, in every given moment, there are hundreds of people in China waiting for a death sentence. And we call the prison, so they shoot the person in the right dimension to the patient that I need to treat. And when I've heard that, I understand that this wonderful method that was described in the medical literature is not valid for me on the ethical basis. I cannot use it, even though I want very much to save the life of the patient that I'm in charge.
41.
So these three doctors, very famous international transplant surgeons, very, very well respected. So the medical community actually approached China. In 2005, the World Medical Association said, China, we know you're doing this, you really need to stop. 2007, the Chinese Medical Association said, you know what, okay, we're going to stop. To this day, have not stopped. False promises. Why? One reason, many reasons, but one of them is this is profitable. This is extremely big business we're talking about. And many hospitals, it's their number one source of making money. If you look here, cornea is 30,000, heart 130,000, liver 100,000. One person, hundreds of millions, half $500,000 could be. If you look at different people try to estimate how much money is being made annually. One I like, they estimate $1.2 billion annually from illegal organ trade and trafficking. So we know China executes more prisoners than every other country in the world combined. If you look at it graphically, they're way off the chart. And they don't just execute, mass murderers or, people who commit heinous crimes. They have even minor offenses that they execute people for. But the problem is when we look at the numbers, if people who look at how many people they're executing, they try to estimate, it's a state secret. China doesn't say, okay, we did 8,000 this year, 9,000 last year. So there's different organizations that look to try and put these numbers in perspective. Amnesty International, put it at around 1,700, 2,000. I'd say a good estimate the past few years is around 3,500. But the problem with that is if they're only executing 3,500 and they're transplanting 10,000, the numbers really weren't adding up. And if you talk with people, this is from the Wall Street Journal here, this graph, if you talk with people every year, China is executing less people every year. So their numbers are going down. If you look at it graphically, in 2010, you can see how much lower it was than 2000, but the number of transplants are going up. So something didn't make sense, doesn't sit well. Furthermore, every person who's executed can't be a good transplant patient. One big problem is the people in jails in China. There's a huge problem with hepatitis. It's estimated 30 to 50% of them have hepatitis B or C. So they're automatically excluded from being an organ donor. So not every person executed would be a great candidate to give organs, further complicating things. So the way China, the number of transplants they're doing and the way they do it on demand in such a short period of time, there really was no other clear explanation of how they could do it without them relying on prisoners of conscience. Without what Ethan Gutman was talking about, this group of people who are sitting in these jails and prisons waiting for people who come over for medical tourism to be used as organ donors. And we have the two distinguished panelists here. I mentioned both their books. They've estimated tens of thousands of people, especially the group Falun Gong, has been killed for their organs. I'm not going to go into this much because Ethan just talked about this in great detail, but I will say, in these prison labor camps, first year alone, they say about 2 million Falun Gong practitioners were put in jail. That's a huge number of people. And that in these prison systems, or China calls it the Laogai system, it's not just prisons. I mean, they have forced labor camps, black jails, military facilities, psychiatric facilities, all these prisoners of conscience sitting somewhere within this mass network of what they call the Laogai system. It's an estimated 450,000 to 1 million Falun Gong practitioners at any time within this system. That's a huge number. I'm going to skip a couple of these, but they were a particularly vulnerable group, as Ethan said. And what is the international transplant? Oh, this quote. We talked about them saying they're going to stop. Well, it wasn't even this past year. One of their top transplant surgeons said, we have no foreseeable future we're going to stop relying on prisoners, that we're going to continue to do this, basically. And if you ask the two most distinguished transplant societies, as Ethan had said before, the number one being the International Transplant Society,